Princess Lyrelei stood on the bridge of the royal ship Starweaver and looked out at the vast darkness of space. The stars seemed so small from here, like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. She had seen this view 1,000 times before, but today felt different. Today she was traveling to the Outer Rim worlds on her first solo diplomatic mission. The princess was beautiful in the way all Zephyrians were beautiful. Her skin was pale like moonlight, her ears were pointed and elegant, and her long silver hair flowed down her back like liquid metal. Her eyes were the color of deep purple flowers, and when she focused, they seemed to glow with inner light. She was 300 years old, which made her young by Zephyrian standards, but she had the grace and wisdom that came with her royal bloodline. Lyrelei touched the crystal pendant at her throat. It was a communication device that connected her mind to her mother, Queen Seraphina, back on the home world. The connection was weak at this distance, but she could still feel her mother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Commander Voss approached her from behind. He was her personal guard, assigned by her mother to keep her safe during this important journey. Voss had served the royal family for 50 years, and his loyalty was supposed to be absolute. His face was stern, and his armor was polished to a mirror shine. "Princess, we will reach the trading station in 1 hour," Voss said with a bow. "The fuel and supply stop should take no more than 3 hours. Then we continue to the Outer Rim." Lyrelei nodded. She had studied the mission briefings carefully. The Outer Rim worlds were home to many different alien species who had grown tired of the constant wars between the larger galactic powers. They wanted to form their own alliance, and they had asked the Zephyrian Empire to help them negotiate the terms. It was a great honor for her people, who were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and fairness. "Have you prepared the security arrangements for the station?" she asked. "Of course, Princess. My team will escort you if you wish to visit the market areas. The station is neutral territory, so there should be no threats. But we must remain cautious." Lyrelei had heard stories about the trading stations that served the space lanes between worlds. They were rough places where merchants, pirates, and travelers of all kinds came to buy, sell, and trade. Most Zephyrians avoided such places, preferring the clean, peaceful environments of their own worlds. But Lyrelei was curious about other cultures, and she wanted to see how different species lived and worked together. The Starweaver was a magnificent ship, built with the advanced technology that made Zephyrian vessels the fastest and most elegant in the galaxy. Its hull was smooth and curved like a seashell, and it moved through space without the loud engines that other ships needed. The crew was small but highly trained, and they had served on royal missions for many years. As they approached the trading station, Lyrelei could see it growing larger in the view screen. It was a massive structure made of metal and glass, with docking bays that stuck out like arms reaching into space. Ships of every size and design were attached to it, from tiny single-person fighters to huge cargo vessels that carried goods between the worlds. The station was called Haven Point, and it had been built at the crossing of several major trade routes. It was owned by a consortium of different species who had agreed to keep it neutral and safe for all travelers. Pirates were not allowed to attack ships near the station, and weapons were strictly controlled in the populated areas. Captain Hayes, the ship's commander, spoke from his position at the control station. "Princess, we have received clearance to dock at Bay 7. The station authorities have been informed of your presence, and they guarantee your safety while you are here." Lyrelei felt a small thrill of excitement. This was the farthest she had ever traveled from home, and everything here was new and different. She had grown up in the crystal palaces of the Zephyrian capital, surrounded by gardens and fountains and the peaceful sounds of her people's music. This place would be loud and chaotic and full of aliens she had never seen before. The docking process took 20 minutes, and then the ship was securely attached to the station. Lyrelei could feel the slight vibration as the artificial gravity. Systems synchronized and the airlocks sealed together. Commander Voss appeared at her side with 6 other guards, all wearing their ceremonial armor and carrying their energy weapons. "Are you ready, Princess?" he asked. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Yes, I am ready." The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Lirelei stepped onto the station for the first time. The corridor was wider than she had expected, with metal walls and bright lights that were harsher than the gentle illumination she was used to. The air smelled different, too, full of strange scents from a dozen different worlds. They walked through the corridor toward the main hub of the station. Other travelers moved past them, some curious about the elegant Zephyrians, and others too busy with their own affairs to pay attention. Lirelei saw species she recognized from her studies and others that were completely new to her. The main hub was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched up several levels and walkways that connected different sections of the station. Shops and restaurants lined the walls, and the sound of voices speaking in dozens of languages filled the air. Lirelei had never seen anything like it. Commander Voss guided her toward the fuel depot where the Starweaver would be refueled and resupplied. As they walked, Lirelei noticed that some of the other travelers were watching them with interest. She was used to being recognized, since her image was known throughout the galaxy, but something about the way these particular individuals were looking at her made her feel uneasy. She was about to mention this to Voss when he suddenly stopped, walking. His hand moved to his weapon, and the other guards immediately formed a protective circle around her, but instead of defending her, they turned their weapons toward her. "Commander Voss, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion and growing fear. Voss removed his helmet, and she saw that his expression was cold and hard. "I am sorry, Princess, but there has been a change of plans. You will be coming with us, but not to the outer rim worlds." Before she could react, she felt a sharp pain in her neck. One of the guards had injected her with something, and the world began to spin around her. Her telepathic abilities, which normally allowed her to sense the thoughts and emotions of others, suddenly went dark. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Voss speaking into a communication device. "The package is secured. Bring the ship around to Bay 12 as planned." Princess Lirelei, heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, collapsed into the arms of the men who had sworn to protect her, and who had instead betrayed her to forces she could not yet imagine. Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last cargo container into his ship. The Freedom's Edge was not the biggest or prettiest vessel in the galaxy, but it was his, and he had spent the last 10 years making sure every system worked perfectly. The ship was built for cargo hauling, with a sturdy hull and reliable engines that could take him anywhere he needed to go. Jake was 34 years old and had the kind of face that people trusted. His brown hair was always a little messy, and his clothes were practical rather than fashionable. He had worked hard for everything he owned, and it showed in the way he moved and spoke. Unlike most humans who stayed in the safe inner systems, Jake had chosen to work the dangerous outer rim routes where the pay was better, but the risks were much higher. He had learned to speak 7 different alien languages, and he understood the customs of a dozen different species. This made him valuable as a trader, since many aliens preferred to do business with someone who showed respect for their culture. Jake had always believed that people were people, no matter what planet they came from or how many arms they had. The trading station where he was currently docked was called Haven Point, and Jake had been coming here for 5 years. He knew most of the regular traders and had built relationships with the station administrators. It was a rough place, but it was also one of the few locations where different species could meet and trade without worrying about the politics and wars that plagued the rest of the galaxy. Jake was checking his cargo manifest when he heard voices coming from the cantina next to the docking bay. 2 Krell merchants were talking loudly about something that had happened earlier in the day. "Did you hear about the Zephyrian princess?" one of them said. "She was supposed to be here on some kind of diplomatic mission. What about her? The other Krell asked. Word is she never made it to her next destination. Her ship left the station on schedule, but it never arrived where it was supposed to go. Some people are saying pirates got her. Jake stopped what he was doing and listened more carefully. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful people who rarely got involved in conflicts. If someone had captured one of their royals, it would cause serious problems. He walked over to the cantina and sat at the bar. The bartender was a friendly Voltan named Crix, who had been working at Haven Point for as long as anyone could remember. What's this about a Zephyrian princess? Jake asked. Crix's 4 eyes looked around nervously before he answered. Princess, Lyrelay was here yesterday with her guards. They refueled and left, but something went wrong. Her ship was supposed to arrive at the Centauri station 12 hours ago, but it never showed up. Could be engine trouble, Jake said. Could be, Crix agreed. But there's more. Some of the dock workers saw strange things yesterday. The princess's guards were acting weird, and there was a ship in Bay 12 that wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody saw it arrive, and it left right after the princess's ship did. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He had seen pirates operate before, and what Crix was describing sounded like their kind of work. Pirates were smart enough to know that they couldn't attack a Zephyrian ship directly, but if they had help from the inside, they could make it look like an accident or a technical failure. What kind of ship was in Bay 12? Jake asked. Nobody. Got a good look at it, but the registration was fake. I checked the records myself. The ship that was supposed to be in that bay was actually on the other side of the galaxy. Jake thanked Crix and went back to his ship. He sat in his pilot's chair and thought about what he had learned. Most people would have forgotten about it and gone on with their own business. The Zephyrians were powerful and wealthy, and they could take care of their own problems. But Jake couldn't stop thinking about his sister Amy. Amy had been captured by pirates 8 years ago while working on a medical transport ship. Jake had tried everything to find her, but the pirates had vanished into the deep space regions where law enforcement couldn't follow. He never saw her again, and the guilt of not being able to save her still kept him awake at night. Jake accessed his ship's computer and began searching through the databases he had collected over the years. As an independent trader, he had learned to gather information about criminal activities in his area. It was a matter of survival, since pirates and smugglers were always looking for easy targets. He found references to a pirate group called the Crimson Void that had been active in this sector recently. They were led by a brutal alien named Captain Vex Thanor, and they specialized in kidnapping wealthy targets for ransom. The group was known for using corrupt officials and guards to help them carry out their crimes. Jake cross-referenced the information with the ship movements around Haven Point, and a pattern began to emerge. 3 times in the past 6 months, valuable prisoners had disappeared from the station, and each time there had been unexplained ship movements and corrupted security records. The more Jake investigated, the more convinced he became that Princess Lyrelay had been taken by the Crimson Void pirates. He found reports of similar operations they had carried out, always with inside help and always leaving no obvious evidence behind. Most humans would have reported this information to the authorities and let them handle it. But Jake knew that the authorities in this sector were either corrupt or too scared to go after dangerous pirates. By the time they organized a rescue mission, if they organized one at all, the princess would probably be dead. Jake stood up and walked around his ship, thinking hard about what he should do. The smart thing would be to mind his own business and continue with his planned cargo run. He had contracts to fulfill and bills to pay, and getting involved with pirates was a good way to end up dead. But he kept thinking about Amy, and about how helpless he had felt when she was taken. He thought about Princess Lyrelay, who was probably scared and alone somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars. She was supposed to be on a mission to help bring peace to the Outer Rim worlds, and instead, she had been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect her. Jake made his decision. He began modifying his ship's systems for a tracking mission. The Freedom's Edge had military-grade sensors that he had installed after Amy's disappearance, and the ship's stealth capabilities were better than most people realized. He had spent years upgrading and improving everything, partly because he was an engineer by training, and partly because he had always hoped he might need to rescue someone someday. He plotted possible courses that the pirates might have taken, using his knowledge of their previous operations and the locations of their known hideouts. There were dozens of possibilities, but Jake was patient and methodical. He had learned to think like a criminal during his years on the Outer Rim. After 6 hours of preparation, Jake was ready to begin his search. He knew he was probably making a terrible mistake that would get him killed, but he also knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. Somewhere out there, a young woman was depending on someone to care enough to help her. Jake fired up his engines and requested departure clearance from Haven Point. As his ship pulled away from the station and headed into the dark emptiness of space, he wondered if he would ever see civilization again, but he also felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that maybe this time he could make a difference. Jake had been searching for 3 days when his sensors finally picked up something interesting. Deep in the Razor Belt asteroid field, his equipment detected the energy signature of a large ship trying to hide among the floating rocks. The signature matched the profile of known Crimson Void vessels, and Jake felt his heart rate increase as he realized he might have found what he was looking for. He moved his ship carefully through the asteroid field, using the rocks for cover while he got closer to the target. The Freedom's Edge was designed for stealth operations, and Jake had spent years perfecting the art of staying invisible in space. His ship's hull was coated with materials that absorbed sensor beams, and his engines ran so quietly that most ships would never detect him. Through his view screen, Jake could see the pirate ship Blood Talon anchored against a large asteroid. It was an ugly vessel, built for intimidation rather than beauty, with weapon ports along its hull and armor plating that had been patched and repaired many times. Jake counted at least 40 crew members moving around the ship's exterior, working on maintenance and repairs. Jake activated his ship's passive sensors and began scanning the Blood Talon for life signs. The readings showed approximately 60 people aboard the ship, which was typical for a pirate crew of this size. But one of the life signs was different from the others. It showed the unique biological patterns of a Zephyrian, and it was coming from what appeared to be a holding cell in the lower part of the ship. Princess Lyrelay was alive, but Jake could see from the medical readings that she was not in good condition. Her vital signs showed stress and exhaustion, and there were indications that she had been drugged or injured. Jake felt anger building inside him as he thought about what the pirates had probably done to her. The problem was how to get her out. The Blood Talon was heavily armed and had a crew of experienced fighters. Jake's ship had weapons, but nothing that could match the firepower of a pirate vessel designed for combat. A direct attack would be suicide, and even if he somehow managed to damage their ship, they would probably kill the princess rather than let her be rescued. Jake studied the situation for several hours, looking for any weakness he could exploit. The pirates were clearly planning to stay in the asteroid field for a while, since they were doing major maintenance work on their ship. Jake noticed that they were having problems with their life support systems, which were old and unreliable. An idea began to form in Jake's mind. It was dangerous and required a lot of luck, but it might be the only chance he had. Jake was an engineer, and he knew more about ship systems than most people. If he could get aboard the Blood Talon disguised as a maintenance worker, he might be able to sabotage their systems while locating the princess. Jake spent the next 12 hours preparing for the most dangerous thing he had ever attempted. He modified his appearance using makeup and prosthetics to look like a Corvan, a species known for their technical skills and willingness to work for anyone who paid well. He programmed his ship's computer to send a fake maintenance contract, offered to the pirates, claiming that he was an independent contractor who specialized in life support repairs. The plan worked better than Jake had dared to hope. The pirates were desperate to get their systems fixed, and they agreed to let him come aboard to assess the problems. Jake docked his ship to one of the Blood Talon's service ports and walked onto the pirate vessel carrying a toolkit and wearing coveralls that hid his weapons. The ship was even more unpleasant on the inside than it had looked from the outside. The corridors were dirty and poorly maintained, and the air smelled like unwashed bodies and machine oil. The pirates who escorted him to the engineering section were rough and dangerous looking, but they treated him like any other hired worker. Jake spent 2 hours examining the life support systems and identifying all the ways he could sabotage them without killing anyone. He needed to create enough chaos to cover his rescue attempt, but he didn't want to murder the entire crew. Despite what they had done, Jake still believed that life was valuable. While he worked, Jake used his tools to secretly plant small explosive devices throughout the ship. The devices were designed to damage specific systems rather than cause major explosions, but they would be enough to disable the Blood Talon's weapons and engines when the time came. Finding Princess Lyralai took longer than Jake had expected. The ship was large and had many levels, and the pirates kept a close watch on him while he moved through the corridors. But Jake was patient and careful, and eventually he located the holding cells in the lower section of the ship. The princess was being kept in a small room with metal walls and no windows. She was sitting on a narrow bed, wearing simple clothes that were dirty and torn. Her silver hair was tangled, and her purple eyes looked tired and afraid. Around her neck was a metal collar that Jake recognized as a neural suppressor, a device designed to block telepathic abilities. When Jake appeared at the door of her cell, Lyralai looked up at him with suspicion and fear. She had never seen his species before, and she had no reason to trust anyone who appeared on a pirate ship. "Who are you?" she asked in the common galactic language. Jake looked around to make sure no one was watching, then removed his disguise. "My name is Jake Martinez. I'm a human trader, and I'm here to get you out." Lyralai stared at him in disbelief. "Human? But humans are primitive. How did you find me? Why would you risk your life for someone you don't know?" Jake began working on the lock of her cell while he answered. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because no one deserves to be treated like this. And because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to help." The lock was more complicated than Jake had expected, but his engineering skills served him well. While he worked, he explained his plan to the princess. They would need to move quickly once he triggered the sabotage devices, because the pirates would realize what was happening within minutes. "Can you walk?" Jake asked as the cell door finally opened. "Yes," Lyralai said, though Jake could see that she was weak from her imprisonment. Jake used his tools to remove the neural suppressor from her neck. As soon as the device came off, Lyralai's eyes began to glow with the inner light that marked active Zephyrian telepathy. She looked around in surprise as her mental abilities returned. "I can sense your thoughts," she said to Jake. "You really are trying to help me? But why? What do you gain from this?" "Nothing," Jake said simply. "Sometimes people do things because they're right, not because they're profitable." Jake gave Lyralai a spare coverall to wear over her prison clothes, and he showed her how to move quietly through the ship's corridors. They made their way toward the docking port, where Jake's ship was attached, avoiding the main crew areas and staying in the maintenance sections. Everything went according to plan until they were almost at the docking port. A pirate guard spotted them and realized that something was wrong. He shouted an alarm and reached for his weapon, but Jake was faster. Years of dangerous trading had taught him how to fight, and he knocked the pirate unconscious before he could raise the alert. But the damage was done. Other pirates had heard the commotion, and Jake could hear them coming through the corridors. He activated the sabotage devices he had planted, and immediately the ship's lights began flickering as systems started failing throughout the Blood Talon. Jake and Lyralai ran for his ship as chaos erupted around them. Emergency alarms were blaring, and the pirates were shouting orders and threats as they tried to figure out what was happening. Jake's explosive devices were doing exactly what he had designed them to do, disabling critical systems without causing casualties. They reached the docking port just as the Blood Talon's artificial gravity failed. Jake helped Lorelei into his ship and sealed the airlock behind them. As he ran to the pilot's seat, he could hear the pirates pounding on the hull of his ship and shouting threats. The Freedom's Edge detached from the pirate vessel and accelerated away from the asteroid. Behind them, the Blood Talon was completely disabled, drifting helplessly with its crew working frantically to restore basic life support. Jake had succeeded in his rescue mission, but now came the hard part, getting Princess Lorelei safely home. The Freedom's Edge limped through space with its engines running at half power. Jake's ship had taken more damage during the escape than he had initially realized, and the faster-than-light drive was making worrying noises every time he tried to increase speed. What should have been a 2-day journey back to Zephyrian space was now going to take at least a week. Princess Lorelei sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching Jake work on the ship's systems. She had cleaned herself up using the small shower in Jake's quarters, and he had given her some of his spare clothes to wear. The simple human garments looked strange on her elegant frame, but they were clean and warm. "Your ship is very different from Zephyrian vessels," she said, as Jake replaced a damaged power coupling. "Different how?" Jake asked, without looking up. "From his work. Everything is so practical. Our ships are built for beauty as well as function. We believe that the things we create should please the eye and lift the spirit." Jake paused in his work and looked around the cramped engineering space. The walls were covered with tools and spare parts, and every surface was marked with the wear and tear of constant use. "I guess I never thought about making things beautiful. I just wanted them to work." "Why did you become a trader?" Lorelei asked. "Most humans stay in the inner systems where it's safe." Jake was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I had a sister named Amy. She was a nurse on medical transport ships, helping people who got hurt in accidents or conflicts. 8 years ago, her ship was attacked by pirates, and she was taken along with several other crew members. I tried to find her, but I never could. The authorities said there was nothing they could do." "I'm sorry," Lorelei said softly. "Is that why you came to rescue me? Because of your sister?" "Partly," Jake admitted, "but also because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't live with myself knowing someone was suffering when I might be able to help." Lorelei studied Jake's face as he continued working. She had lived for 300 years and had met thousands of people, but she had never encountered anyone quite like this human. His thoughts, which she could sense now that her telepathic abilities had returned, were unlike those of any person she had known. Most people's minds were filled with calculations about personal benefit, fears about their own safety, or desires for wealth and power. But Jake's thoughts were focused on others. Even now, as he repaired his damaged ship, he was worried about getting her home safely, rather than about the costs and risks he was facing. "Tell me about your people," Lorelei said. "I have studied humans in my diplomatic training, but I realize I don't really understand you." Jake smiled as he sealed the power coupling and moved on to the next repair. "What do you want to know?" "Your lifespans are so short compared to ours. We live for thousands of years, but you have less than a century. How does that change the way you think about things?" "I guess it makes us more willing to take risks," Jake said. "When you only have a limited time, you want to make it count. Some humans waste their lives, but others try to do as much good as they can while they're here." "But doesn't the shortness of your lives make you more selfish? Why would you sacrifice for others when you have so little time for yourselves?" Jake stopped working and looked at her directly. "Maybe that's exactly why we do it. When you know your time is limited, every moment becomes more precious. And the moments when you help someone else, when you make a real difference in their life, those are the moments that make everything worthwhile." Lorelei had never thought about it that way before. Zephyrians planned their lives in centuries, carefully considering every decision and its long-term consequences. But perhaps there was wisdom in the human approach as well, in the willingness to act quickly and decisively when action was needed. Over the next few days, as Jake continued to repair his ship and navigate toward Zephyrian space, the two of them talked about many things. Lyreley told Jake about her life as a princess, about the weight of responsibility she carried, and her fears about living up to her mother's reputation as a great leader. Jake told her about Earth, about the long history of human struggle, and the wars and disasters that had shaped his species. He explained how humans had learned to survive and thrive despite having no natural advantages like telepathy or long lifespans. "We had to learn to work together," Jake said, as they shared a simple meal in the ship's small galley. "Humans are weak individually, but we're strong when we cooperate. We learned that helping each other wasn't just nice to do, it was necessary for survival." "Is that why you helped me?" Lyreley asked. "Because cooperation is part of your nature?" "Maybe," Jake said. "But I think it's more than that. I think most people, human or alien, want to do good things. They just need someone to show them that it's possible." On the fourth day of their journey, Jake's ship suffered a critical failure. The faster-than-light drive finally gave up completely, leaving them stranded in empty space 2 days away from the nearest Zephyrian outpost. Jake worked for hours trying to repair the damage, but the components were too badly damaged to fix with the parts he had available. "We're going to have to send a distress signal," Jake said as he emerged from the engine compartment, covered in grease and looking exhausted. Lyreley felt fear rising in her chest. "But if you signal for help, the Zephyrian fleet will find us. They'll arrest you for kidnapping me. Our laws are very strict about aliens who take members of the royal family even if they claim to be rescuing them." Jake sat down heavily in his pilot's chair. "I know, but we don't have any other choice. Your safety is more important than what happens to me." "No," Lyreley said firmly. "You risked everything to save me. I won't let you be punished for doing the right thing." Jake looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm going to contact my mother directly. I've never been able to reach her telepathically across such a great distance, but I have to try. If I can explain the situation to her before the fleet arrives, maybe I can make her understand what really happened." Jake shook his head. "That's too dangerous. Long-range telepathy like that could damage your mind permanently. I won't let you risk yourself for me." "You didn't let me have a choice when you decided to rescue me," Lyreley said with a smile. "Now it's my turn to take a risk for someone else." Before Jake could stop her, Lyreley closed her eyes and reached out with her mind across the vast distances of space. Jake watched helplessly as she strained to make contact with her mother, her face growing pale with effort and pain. The attempt lasted for 3 hours, with Lyreley pushing her telepathic abilities far beyond their normal limits. Several times, Jake thought she was going to collapse, but she refused to give up. Finally, just when Jake was about to physically stop her, her eyes opened and she smiled weakly. "I reached her," Lyreley whispered. "Mother is coming, and she knows the truth about what happened. You're going to be safe." As Lyreley collapsed from exhaustion, Jake caught her and held her gently. For the first time since he had found her in that pirate cell, he allowed himself to hope that everything might work out after all. The Zephyrian battle fleet appeared in space like a constellation of deadly stars. 12 massive warships materialized from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like polished silver and their weapon systems powered and ready for combat. At the center of the formation was the royal flagship Eternal Grace, a vessel so beautiful and terrifying that it took Jake's breath away. Jake stood at the controls of his damaged ship and watched the fleet approach. Each of those warships was larger than anything he had ever seen, and any one of them could have destroyed his small cargo vessel with a single shot. But Princess Lyreley had assured him that her mother understood the situation, and he had to trust that the Queen would listen before she acted. "Attention, unknown vessel. came a voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Theron of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You are ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to flee or resist will result in your immediate destruction." Jake looked at Lirelai, who was sitting in the co-pilot's chair, looking pale but determined. She had not fully recovered from her telepathic contact with her mother, but she insisted on being awake when the fleet arrived. "Let me talk to them," she said, reaching for the communication controls. "This is Princess Lirelai aboard the vessel Freedom's Edge," she said into the microphone. "I am safe and unharmed. The human Jake Martinez rescued me from Crimson Void pirates and is returning me home. I request immediate audience with my mother." There was a long silence from the fleet, and Jake could imagine the confusion and surprise among the Zephyrian officers. They had probably expected to find their princess being held captive by dangerous criminals, not sitting freely in the cockpit of a human trader's ship. "Princess, this is Admiral Theron. We are relieved to hear that you are safe. Queen Seraphina is aboard the flagship and wishes to speak with you immediately. We are sending a shuttle to transfer you to the Eternal Grace." "The human comes with me," Lirelai said firmly. "He is under my personal protection, and I will not be separated from him until I have spoken with my mother." Jake felt a surge of gratitude toward the princess. She was risking her own reputation and relationship with her mother to protect him, and he was deeply moved by her loyalty. The Zephyrian shuttle that came to collect them was a work of art, with flowing lines and a hull that seemed to glow with inner light. Jake had never been aboard a Zephyrian vessel before, and he was amazed by the elegant design and advanced technology. Everything was beautiful and functional at the same time, and the air itself seemed to sparkle with energy. The flight to the flagship took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours to Jake. He was about to meet the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, and his life would probably be decided by what happened in the next few hours. He tried to stay calm and confident, but his hands were shaking as they docked with the Eternal Grace. The interior of the royal flagship was beyond anything Jake could have imagined. The corridors were wide and lined with crystal panels that glowed with soft light, and the ceiling was so high that it seemed to disappear into a gentle blue mist. Everything was clean and perfect, and Jake felt very small and rough compared to the elegant Zephyrians who moved through the passages. Queen Seraphina was waiting for them in a chamber that could only be described as a throne room. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair that flowed like liquid metal and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. Her presence filled the room with a power that Jake could feel even without telepathic abilities. But when she saw her daughter, all of the queen's royal dignity disappeared. She ran across the room and gathered Lirelai into her arms, holding her tightly and whispering words in the musical Zephyrian language that Jake could not understand. "My daughter," the queen said in the common galactic language, tears streaming down her perfect face. "When I received word that you had been taken, I feared I would never see you again. Are you truly unharmed?" "I am fine, Mother," Lirelai said, returning her mother's embrace, "but only because of this human who risked everything to save me." Queen Seraphina turned her attention to Jake for the first time, and he felt the full weight of her gaze. Her eyes seemed to look directly into his soul, and Jake wondered if she was reading his thoughts and emotions the way her daughter could. "You are Jake Martinez," the queen said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "My daughter has told me what you did for her. You found her when my own intelligence services could not. You rescued her from pirates when my own fleet was searching in the wrong places. You risked your life and your ship for someone you had never met, with no hope of reward or recognition." Jake didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. "Why?" the queen asked. "Why would a human do such a thing? Your species is known for being practical and self-interested. What did you hope to gain?" "Nothing, Your Majesty," Jake said honestly. "I did it because it was right. Because someone needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. Queen Seraphina studied him for a long moment, and Jake felt as if she was looking at every moment of his life, every decision he had ever made, every thought he had ever had. Finally, she nodded slowly. Lyra Lai has shared with me her memories of your time together, the Queen said. I have seen through her eyes the kindness you showed her, the risks you took, and the wisdom you shared. I have also felt the purity of your intentions and the strength of your character. The Queen walked to a cabinet at the side of the room and removed something that glittered in the soft light. When she returned, Jake could see that it was a crystal pendant similar to the one Lorelei wore, but somehow more complex and beautiful. Jake Martinez of Earth, Queen Seraphina said formally. I name you Friend of the Zephyrian Crown, the first human ever to receive this honor. You will be welcome in our space for as long as you live, and your people will be judged not by their past reputation, but by the example you have set. Jake knelt as the Queen placed the pendant around his neck. He could feel energy flowing from the crystal, and somehow he knew that he would be able to communicate telepathically with any Zephyrian he met. Thank you, Your Majesty, Jake said, but I ask for nothing for myself. All I want is for humans and Zephyrians to work together as equals, to trade fairly and treat each other with respect. It will be so, the Queen promised. And more than that. My daughter will one day rule our empire, and she will remember the lessons you taught her about courage and sacrifice and the value of helping others. As Jake prepared to leave the flagship in a new ship provided by the Queen, Princess Lorelei came to say goodbye. Will I see you again? She asked. The galaxy is a big place, Jake said with a smile. But I have a feeling our paths will cross again someday. I hope so, Lorelei said. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms, and that the length of a life matters less than what you do with the time you have. Jake piloted his new ship away from the Zephyrian fleet and set course for the Outer Rim worlds. Behind him, Princess Lorelei resumed her interrupted diplomatic mission, but now she carried with her a new understanding of what it meant to serve others. And throughout the galaxy, word began to spread that a human had proven himself worthy of the highest honor the Zephyrian Empire could bestow. The story of Jake Martinez and his rescue of Princess Lorelei became legend among the traders and travelers of the Outer Rim. It was proof that courage and compassion were not the exclusive property of any one species, and that sometimes the most ordinary people could do the most extraordinary things. Jake continued his work as a trader, but now he carried with him the knowledge that he had made a real difference in the galaxy, and that sometimes one person really could change everything.